Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm really excited to bring you guys another review. These are for the PSB P3 bookshelf speakers. They are quite small and we have them here and here. I bought these with my own cold hard cash, so this is going to be another no BS review as usual. But I'll be honest guys, every now and then I get stuff as a review sample. It's still a no BS review. I don't feel like I'm really like tied to like any company enough or like care enough to like lie for anyone. Like I've got my own like reference system that I just love so much, and like I'll be honest, if like a company never sent me any review gear ever, this channel would do just fine because I buy most of the stuff anyway. So let's just get into it because my mic's about to die. So I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible, but I'm a little bit long-winded and like the sound of my own voice, so I might fail at that. Getting into it, this speaker is good for 57 hertz to 21 kilohertz, 85 decibels anechoic or 87 decibels listening room sensitivity, 8 ohm nominal or 4 ohm minimum. It's good for 10 to 80 watts. 3/4 inch aluminum dome tweeter, 4-inch polypropylene woofer. Its height, width, and depth are 8.5 by 5 by 7 inches. They weigh 4.9 pounds each. They come in black, ash, or walnut. It's a vinyl finish, of course. Magnetic grills, 5-way binding posts, which you can see back here as a little mount of some kind you can use also. And they are only $219. That's good. I love cheap stuff, so let's get into it. We're going to talk about the pros, the cons, the highs, mids, lows, you know what I mean, all that good stuff, some listening impressions. And by the way, some of you may have noticed the PSB Imagine Mini behind me. This is very, very expensive speaker at $750. And we're gonna get to why those are behind me at the end of this video, and definitely stay tuned for that because it's gonna be a little bit of a shocker. So let's move on to the treble. It's neutral for the most part. It's not tilted up, it's not recessed, it's not smooth, it's just like really neutral, right? It has excellent detail retrieval, but the resolution of those details is just okay. And what I mean by that is with these speakers, you're gonna hear detail you've typically never heard before, but the texture of them, how refined they are, how detailed those details are, is a little bit on the low side. And that's not a knock against it, because usually at the $200 price point, you're not hearing stuff you've never heard before. So just the fact that you're hearing stuff you've never heard before is awesome. To have the expectation that those micro details should have good texture as well, that's a little bit too high of an expectation and asking more than can be offered at the $200 price category. Moving on, nuances, micro detail are in line with its price, meaning things like shimmer, scale, dynamics, and air are just okay. Again, that's not a knock against it. For this price category, that's kind of expected in my opinion. Mids. So as with all PSB speakers, things like imaging and vocals are phenomenal. That's just something they just kill it every time when it comes to that. They are so good with their vocals. I really, really like that. What else do we have here? Tonality is also excellent. I'd say that's another hallmark of the PSB brand. Tonality was really good, but something was missing for me. And I'm gonna, when I get to the cons, maybe it's something in there. I don't know, but this is what I wrote. They never felt loud. Now, I don't know if that has to do more with the treble or the mid-range, but these never felt loud to me, no matter how much I cranked the volume knob on my amp. And trust me, I cranked that thing. And we're gonna get to that. So those are the mids. Moving on to the bass. It's a tiny speaker, but don't get me wrong. This thing has a lot of bass. I actually wrote bass is plentiful, more so than larger competitors like the Polk S15. But in fairness, the Polk S15 has a little bit more low-end extension with its larger woofer and bigger cabinet. Bass is a touch on the warm side with an emphasis on mid-bass. Some people call that mid-bass bloat. I would say that's an accurate way to refer to it, which can at times actually mud things up a bit. And I think that's going to be one of those things some people really like and some people really dislike. I'm on the dislike side. I felt like it took away some of its kind of like articulation and edge, but you know, again, 219 bucks, guys. Moving on, what else do we have here? They don't have the quickest bass, but it was rhythmic and punchy, and overall, I do feel these need a sub. During the review period, I used 2 different amplifiers, and I used a subwoofer half the time and no subwoofer the other half the time. So the subwoofer I used, out of all the ones I have here, because I still have the Aperion Bravis 8D, I still have the Emotiva S8, I still have the Bowers & Wilkins ASW 608 because I own that, and I still have the SPS SB3000 because I own that. I felt the best pairing was the Emotiva S8 with its single down-firing driver and its secondary passive radiator, both being 8 inches. It was a great pairing. That subwoofer has a lot of edge to its bass, and that, I don't want to say it cleaned up that bit of muddiness, but it added some like authority to it in a way that just made it okay. You know what I mean? Anyway. Moving on, so we got pros and cons. Pros, the revealing top end is kind of unheard of at this price point. I really thought that was cool. I listed looks as a pro. I think it's a good looking speaker. It's a really simple design at the end of the day, but I don't know, maybe I'm just a sucker for looks. I'm not in love with the tweeter being on the bottom part of it, but I do think it's a good looking speaker. I'll say the price is definitely a pro, only $219. That's in a lot of people's budget. And even if it's like slightly like out of your budget, like maybe you're a college student or just like really young and you're like, man, 200 bucks is still a lot of money. And you're right, 200 bucks is a lot of money. Well, you know, you can still save that over a few months and you could still buy these. So I like that. The finish, I listed as a pro, and I mean like the overall fit and finish. PSB, I would say, is somewhat synonymous with quality. They do a good job putting their speakers together. They always feel good and robust. And you guys want a little scientific knock test? I hear people really like that. Let's see. I'll be honest, anytime I knock on a speaker, they always sound solid. I don't know what that does for anyone, but there you go. What else do we have here? The size is a pro in my opinion because they're small and cute. And the mid-range detail and articulation I listed as a pro also. Moving on to the cons, sense of scale was lacking. And some of you guys might say, hey, it's a small speaker. What did you expect? I'll be honest, I didn't expect big scale, but I think some people do. I think a lot of people, especially from a well-known brand like PSB, despite its $219 price, might expect this speaker to have a huge presentation and a huge sense of scale and a huge soundstage, and it doesn't. Its sense of scale, its soundstage, its presentation are all very in line with its physical size. Don't expect more than what you see here, right? It's going to give you what it can based on its size. They're very difficult to drive. And I do mean very, very difficult to drive. These are the most difficult to drive speakers I've actually ever had. Just to give you an idea for reference, I usually listen to my music around 75 dB, and that kind of requires me to have my volume knob somewhere between 40 and 50. It has 256 steps just for reference. I had to crank these mothers to 130 on my volume knob to get 75 dB. That's a really big difference compared to 40 or 50. Now, when you have 256 steps of like volume adjustment, you know, like, yeah, it's going to be a big difference, but that's like 25% more volume I had to give, and most likely 25% more power. I think that's important to know because if you don't have a powerful amp, or an amp at least with a good power supply, these might not be the best match for you. And I'm going to give you two examples of one amp that is maybe not so good and one amp that is really good, and I believe both are affordable. Yamaha RS202, I just reviewed that amp. I think it's got an honest 35 to 40 watts RMS, and I don't believe it has the beefiest power supply. It, with normal speakers, started to fall apart at louder volumes. It would be a terrible match for these speakers. I absolutely would not recommend it. Instead, something like the Emotiva Mini A100 has a rated 50 watts RMS at 8 ohms and 80 watts at 4 ohms, but a very beefy toroidal transformer will drive these no problem because the Emotiva A100 little integrated amp, when you dig into that volume knob all the way, you can max out that volume knob. It holds its composure together because of its beefy toroidal transformer, and that's the kind of amp you want to drive these. As far as how much power do you need, how much is enough, that's kind of like personal. I would say as long as you have an amp that allows you to dig into that volume knob all the way without losing its composure, that means it's got a beefy enough power supply to drive these. Some people consider that a high current amp. I don't know. I don't care. You just need an amp that's got good, honest, clean power. Moving on. Detail texture was so-so. I already mentioned that earlier when I talked about the how revealing it was, but the resolution of that extra detail was okay. It wasn't the best. Again, kind of normal for the price. But I will also say like the detail texture in general is so-so. And that's kind of normal for the price, but kind of not because the Emotiva Airmotive B1 Plus has really good detail texture and it's $229, what, 10 bucks more. Anyway, moving on. What else do we have here? They never felt loud. That was a strange problem I had. No matter how much I dug into that volume knob, I even pulled out my dB meter a few times to confirm that I was at 80 decibels, but they never felt loud. They never conveyed that sense that they were loud. The only way I knew they were loud is by looking at my dB meter, or at some point my ears just kind of started to hurt. But I never had that. I never had that sense that I was listening to my music at a loud volume. And it's not in the same way that like really high-end speakers, will do that. Like super high-end speakers, you can play them really loud and it like doesn't hurt your ears at all. It's like this magical thing they do. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm referring to in these is they were missing something. Again, I don't know what does that in a speaker, but I just kept turning them louder and louder because there was something I was looking for and I wasn't getting it. And I'm going to talk about more in the listening impressions. So listening impressions, we're almost done. They need considerable power. I already told you about that. They can play loud when given power, but the sense of scale is missing unless you sit very, very close. And by very close, I mean 3 to 4 feet away. When I got really close to these, their sense of scale did open up. The airiness did open up a little bit also. So that's something to keep in mind. If you've got your heart set on these and you're going to get them no matter what I say, that's fine. Just I would say make sure you're going to sit kind of closer. You're okay sitting closer, placing them close to you. Moving on. You will hear details without trying, which means they're very revealing. Imaging is excellent, but dynamics were just okay. Tonality is amazing, but they did lack the sense of openness even at this price point. Again, the Emotiva Airmotive B1 Plus was quite a bit more open. The Polk Audio S15 even was quite a bit more open. Now, when I listen to the Polk Audio S15, I'm not like, oh my God, this speaker is so open and airy. No, I just listen to it and I'm like, this speaker, like, it doesn't sound closed off. These, I did get this like sense that they sounded somewhat veiled to me, or like somewhat like muffled in some strange way. Now, that's weird to say for me because their treble isn't smooth. It's not recessed and laid back, nor is it bright. It really is dead neutral. I didn't feel like the mid-range was like recessed or pulled back, like it had a deep V curve or anything. I felt like its mid-range was fairly even-keeled as well. The only thing I felt was really bloated was the bass. Anyway, moving on. Let's see here. This last bit was interesting. The volume does not change the presentation. Usually, when you play a speaker louder, you get more of kind of everything. That's why most people like to listen to their music loud. It just sounds better that way. These didn't do that, and maybe that's why I never felt like they were loud. Maybe that's why I kept digging into that volume knob. I don't know, but how they sound at low volumes is how they sound at loud volumes. Nothing improves. And likewise, nothing gets worse as you turn them down. They just have one presentation regardless of volume. And ultimately, I'll say the speaker was not suited to my taste, and that's okay. The reasons I may dislike them are things that you might be looking for in a speaker. So, and if you can, try to audition them. They might be the perfect speaker for you, despite what the hell I say or I think. Now, why the hell do I have a $750 pair speaker behind me made by the same company? I'm going to get to that. But first, let's do a little comparison. These are quite old sold. In fact, I believe they're being discontinued. I checked Crutchfield's website before posting this video, and they have them, they're listed as no longer available or discontinued. So $750 a pair, $759 I believe actually, $219. Which one's better? These ones, are you kidding me? They're way better at everything. The mid-bass articulation, out of this world. Mid-range, beautiful. Sense of scale, presence, imaging, everything is so good. The treble is smooth, but it's detailed. It has the high resolution. These are so good. They sound good with a cheap amp. They sound 10 times better with an expensive amp. I love these speakers. Why am I gassing them up so much? They're so much more expensive. That makes sense, right? They're worlds apart in price. They're worlds apart in performance. Until recently. I don't know if it's because they're being discontinued or what, or maybe I'm wrong and they're not being discontinued. I don't know. But I hopped online and I found these bad boys at a few places, namely eBay. $300 a pair, brand new, $300 to $350. That brings these quite in line with the price of these. So if that's within your budget and you had your eye on these, get these bad boys instead. Are you kidding me? Traditionally, you would not find yourself in a situation where you can get a company's top of the line speaker, for the small speakers, this is their most expensive one, for damn near the same price as their cheapest one. Again, their performance is worlds apart, as it should be, because their price is worlds apart. $219, $759. But today, you can go on eBay and get this for $300 to $350. Now look, there's going to be some caveats to that. You're most likely buying it from an unauthorized distributor, which means you have no warranty. That's one thing. Second thing is, depending on when these were made, the rubberized finish may be corroded or breaking down on some models. That's something I talked about in my first review of the Imagine Mini, and that's something I was really upset about. However, I would later come to learn it's actually really easy to take care of. You just take a little bit of rubbing alcohol on a paper towel, and you just rub till your heart's content, until all that crap comes off, and it'll reach the point you'll get them just like new. I actually did that to these already, and I'm going to show you. By the way, if you don't believe me, they really are the same size as you can see here. These have that larger than life presentation. You crank these up, and if you close your eyes, they're good, guys. I don't know how else to say it, but anyways, you can see here, no more stickiness. No more stickiness. I cleaned it all up. On the back strip, smooth, no more stickiness. And the cool thing is it retains all the lettering. The base, PSB actually sent me new ones. New ones are available, but you can rub and take all of the rubberized finish off the base also if you want to. So in the past, I would have not recommended these because of the sticky issue, but the sticky issue is so easy to fix if you're willing to put a little elbow grease into it. And I would never bring up these speakers in a review for $219 pair of speakers. But given that they can be found for so cheap right now, it's amazing. And I really, please guys, consider this, because I don't think this will last. For what it's worth, what I think is going on is I think they were discontinued. I think some unauthorized distributors got their hands on them, maybe at a discount to clear them out or whatever, and they're selling them way, way, way below the minimum advertised price or MSRP. And it doesn't matter to anyone because they are discontinued and these are unauthorized dealers anyway. So, if anyone complains to PSB, they're going to be like, I don't know how they got their hands on them, but they're discontinued anyways. Who cares? Anyways, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've left out of this review. There are a few things. Like I said, I had these connected to a cheap amp. I had these connected to an expensive amp. And I'll be honest, there wasn't a big difference one way or another. That's typically not the case. Usually you give a speaker a better amp, it gives you better performance. But when a speaker is really affordable, it doesn't have a whole lot more room left in it. So I would say for these, amp about $500 or less. Spending more than that, I think, is unnecessary unless you plan to upgrade your speakers one day. The subwoofer I recommend with these is the Emotiva S8. That was a really, really good pairing. I used cheap cables when I had these connected. I used the Eden series by Maze Audio. I think those are about $75 or so. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I left out, because these are still good. If the $300 to $350 is too much for these at $219 are still good. But if you can, honestly, these are so much better. Borrow money from a buddy if you have to. These are that much better, and they should be because they're so much more expensive. I think that about wraps this up, guys. If there's anything I've forgotten, I'll leave it in the comments. I'll do a pin post or something like that. If you're wondering why I didn't compare this to more speakers its size, don't worry, that's coming, because I have these, the PSB P3s, I have the Polk Audio S15s, and I have the Emotiva Airmotive B1 Pluses. All three of those speakers are $200 and something on the low side, and we're gonna do a little trio video comparison on those pretty soon here. So you're gonna hear all that fluff later, I promise. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. Later.